What's up, YouTube? Today I'm going to be making a Dark Knight Christian Bale styled Batman cowl. I've been requested this a lot of times over the last 2 years and just never got to it. Part of it was, I'm going to be honest, I was a little dismissive of it. I thought, it would be simple, for one thing. The other thing was, I figured there was probably already something else out there that was close enough to it. And maybe there is, but I couldn't find it. But I didn't also spend, days searching for it. But I actually made 3 for this video, because the first one I make in the video all the way up to the point of Plaqsti dipping, the Plaqsti dip bubbled, and I had to make a second one, which then I glued the seams off, and then I tore apart in rage and threw away, and then made the third one, which actually gets finished and I put on in the video. I think part of the reason I was so dismissive is that the design on that is so good that it's easy to dismiss it and just not really notice, like, the amount of refinement that went into that design that, Christian Bale wore in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. But, that's the thing about Christopher Nolan, is that he's so good, whatever he does, whether, I don't care what it is, even if you don't like the movie, and you don't like the plot, or you don't like whatever, his direction, and his design, and his sets, and everything is always so amazing, and he really knows who to pick to do things, and whoever he chose to design this, and the final design that was approved, was really, really good. So good, in fact, that you can just kind of not even think about it. And I didn't until I started making this and realized, hey, this is going to be a bit more, attention to detail and thought than I honestly thought I was going to have to put in it. So shout out to Kingstrail TV. You are the one that requested this. Most recently, although there have been others in the past, and, I just hadn't gotten to it until now, but that inspired me to do this. And it was excellent practice, especially on the brow area, along with Agent Venom for the newer version of Red Hood I want to do in the new year. So real quick, before we get into the video, I have unfortunately, at least for the channel, had to take on more responsibilities and more management stuff at my job, which means that I'm going to have to spend more hours at my job, which means there's probably going to be a less consistent video upload schedule. So bear with me end of the new year until I get all this stuff straightened out. Once I get everything straightened out and hire some new employees and restructure certain aspects of the business, which I've already started, and also have a partner in this guy Mark, who's really good, and he's doing half of it, and he's already got a lot of his part of it done as well, and we don't even officially take over for about another week. But for the first few weeks, months of the new year, it's going to be slowed down. Also have a convention on January 19th where I'm going as Carnage, so that also is going to, eat into the time of doing build videos. But without any more of me yammering on, let's go ahead and just jump right into the build. So the first thing I'm doing is cutting out all of my pattern pieces. Now you'll notice all my foam pieces are different colors. This is just so you can see the different pattern pieces. Like I have the nose centerpiece here in green. The 2 nose pieces, which I will note the line on the nose is just a straight cut through it. We're going to preheat shape the nostrils prior to gluing it all together. And the eye pieces and the center pieces that you just flip the pattern over to get the other side. I have transferred mine onto cardboard so they're more durable. And then the side piece and the 3 ear pieces, technically 4 ear pieces, but the 4th ear piece is attached to the side, so that just doesn't count. Now, you'll notice on here that on the pattern pieces, and I transferred them here onto the foam as well, in, and there's only one out cut, and it's on the outside edge of the nose. What that means is, whenever you cut it, whether you use scissors or whether you use an X-Acto knife, the in is a reference to the angle. You won't be cutting it straight, you won't be cutting it angled outward, you'll be cutting it inwards, okay? So that when you look at the piece, it has basically a 45-degree angle on the edge instead of a flat cut. If it's not labeled or marked, like up here there's no labels or marks and it's just straight even cuts through the V's and through everything else. I also want to point out before we start gluing that this here looks like a V cut, but it is not. It is actually where this folds over, matches up with this, and then attaches into the top itself. The ears on this are much different than the other Batman cowls I made because the design of this particular Batman cowl is much different. And in my head, I thought it would be quite easy to make, and I started doing this and scrapped idea after idea and pattern after pattern until I came up with this. which is a bit more complicated than I wanted, but I said I would do this as a video, so here we are. Okay, so I'm going to start with gluing together some of the more simple seams and pieces, and what that is going to be is this gap here on the eye. On each one, I am going to apply DAP Weldwood contact cement. You can get it in a small bottle like this. I just saved my bottle, which you can see is rather beat up from 2 years of use, and me not obviously cleaning it very well along the way. Or you can just buy it in containers like this. It's actually less expensive, and you get more. So that's what I usually do. I get about 3 times the amount for about double the cost of this, or you can get a much larger container where you get exponentially more for about, I think, $11 to $15, depending on where you look in the States. Another brand, if you can't find this, is Barge contact cement. I think that is a little bit easier to get overseas, and if it's not sold at craft stores or home improvement stores, you can usually find it in leather shops, because contact cement is a necessity, usually for certain types of leather making where you need these seams without stitches. So I take the applicator brush, and I have brushed some on either side of the surface to be joined, i.e. right here in between these two. I put a little layer on each side. You let it sit for 15 minutes, and then you press them together. Once you stick them together, they're not coming apart, usually. Well, 99.9% of the time. So make sure that when you put them together, they're even, which is why I put registration marks, as you notice, on the patterns, and I've transferred them onto my foam pieces so I can line them up more easily. The other places I'm applying contact cement is on the V-cut, on the top of the center pieces, just 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 on each side centerpiece respectively. And I also have applied it to the ears, and starting with the left number 3 piece, I put it on the inside, and on the number 2 on both sides, and on the number 1 on the inside, and same thing over here, inside of the 3, both sides of the 2, including this little top angled piece, and the inside here of the number 1. After 15 minutes, I'll join these together, show you what it looks like, and go on to the next phase of gluing. Alright, now that I've glued the eye pieces together, it will cause them to bow this way, as you can see, and have some curve to them, which is the reason why the gap was there in the first place. And then once I glue all the V-cuts, the 4 on each piece, they both have a curvature. And then all the angled cuts that I did on the ears, you start at the bottom, line the 2 pieces up, and the 2 and the 3 should match up evenly at the top. There's that angled gap, but the angled gap, the number 1 piece, lining it up from the bottom, will come up and fold over right there. Next, what I've done is I've heated the nostril pieces where I cut here, and using my fingers and thumb, I've curved it to give it more of a nostril shape to it. And you see it's rounded now instead of just flat. And to do this, I use a Drill Master heat gun, which is just a generic off-brand that I pick up at Harbor Freight. In the States, these run between $15 and $30, unless you really want to get something industrial, which you don't need for this because it will certainly melt the foam. It gets way too hot. And the other things that I heated were the centerpiece right here in between these 2 V-cuts on the center pattern pieces on both sides. And what I did was I used some clothespins to hold these back, because if you hold your hand right here and try to heat it, you're going to burn yourself, even with work gloves. So I used clothespins to hold these down. Kind of see some of the mark from it there, but that's okay. That'll come out with the heat gun. And once they're clamped down, I just heated the end and did the same thing as I did the nostril, and used my fingers to just curve it and pull some shape into that. And the next thing I'm going to apply glue to is these V-cuts in between here, and I'm going to glue all 3 of these together, and I'm also going to glue the nose piece together as well. Alright, I have glued the 3 nose pieces together, and with the angle it forms a pretty decent shape. If I want to move this in or out once it's all glued together, I can do that using the heat gun. It will make the foam pliable enough that I can adjust it if I need be, but it looks pretty good so far, so we'll see. Also glued together the brow section. Now there's no registration marks here, okay? So you're just going to have to look at what I have on camera. And the reason there's no registration marks is when I heat and curve and shape this foam, it ends up stretching or contracting a little bit. But you want these ends to meet up and form as flat as possible. Any little gaps here can be filled in with some acrylic latex with silicone later. And you want to have this tip overlapping a little bit on each one so that when they glue together, they have a little piece that's going to fit and match up with this. And now what I'm doing is I'm taking my contact cement and I'm going to apply it to this seam here, from where this mark is here to here. I drew it wrong at first, but from this mark here to here, and from here to here, and all along this inside. The only part I'm not putting any contact cement is on the very ends of this here and this here, because these are going to be glued offset. So I'm going to glue these together, come back, and show you what that looks like. Alright, so I have glued the pieces, and here you can see it is glued offset. Now, to glue this, since I didn't put any contact cement, I used some super glue. And I just, once I had everything in place and these two sides glued and the front here glued, I went ahead and just put a bead in there, was careful not to touch it, and then glued this one in offset as well. And then to reinforce these on the back side, I used some hot glue, which I got from my hot glue gun. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply contact cement to these outside edges, because I am going to glue in the eyepieces next. And once that's done, we'll start assembling all of the rest of this. And for the nostrils as well, I didn't use contact cement on these. I used some super glue and bonded them together and got them as even as possible. I have glued in the eyepieces, and I have started by lining up the ends here, making sure the corners match, because there's a corner on this, and making sure the corner matches here, and the ends are even here. This will require you to push the pattern in somewhat, but when you do, it gives you more of that natural scalloped eye shape that we really, really want. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this here, starting with the corners here, matching it up and attaching it all the way up and back around on both sides, the side piece with the completed eyepiece to the centerpiece. Okay, so both sides are now attached together, and to do this, I started with this corner here and lined up this side first, and then lined up my registration marks all the way around. It's important that you line up the registration marks, otherwise this corner won't quite match up right. The only somewhat tricky part is here. This part of the eyepiece comes not quite, but close to halfway over into the center of this on both sides. But once again, I didn't want to put registration marks there because I felt it would be deceptive due to the fact with the heat forming, it is going to warp the foam and change it somewhat, and it may not match up. And then you trying to use a training wheel system, which is what I kind of consider the whole registration marks thing, in place of judging the proper distance, is going to actually, 9 times out of 10, I feel, give you worse results. And that's why they are not there. And the next thing I'm going to do is apply my contact cement to the center seams here and glue both halves of the shells together. Now, before I do that, though, I suppose I should explain how I glued the back before I get too far ahead of myself. To do the back, I lined up the bottom and the hash marks all the way up to here. I did not put any contact cement on this green part, so there's nothing to attach here, and there's actually a space, which you don't want this glued together. See how my fingers going through there? You don't want that space there glued together, because later we're going to heat this so that we can put some curve and shape into the ears and the cowl itself, and that's why that is not glued. Okay, and now, like I just said, I'm going to glue together the two halves. Alrighty, so I have the nose glued in, and this part was pretty tricky, because as you'll notice there's a curve here, but the nose does not curve when you glue it together. All these curves and stuff get pulled into place whenever you glue it in correctly. So you're going to match these curves up here. The cut for the nostril is about 2 millimeters off from this seam on both sides, and that's how I glued that in. Then I pushed in the centerpiece. After that, there was a gap. I had to force these together, but once you force them together, it pulls this nice shape in. I haven't heated this or shaped this or done anything yet. All the heat forming and stuff to get out like this V area here. Of course, I did the angle cut, so I want a V there, but I haven't done any heat forming. It already has a nice shape just because that's the way the pattern is meant to work. So next, I'm going to grab my canvas hat making mannequin head and my heat gun and start heating this and rounding it all out. Alright, so I've got a good portion of the heat forming done, and I've used my heat gun to get it very hot. And once it's hot, I just start pressing it onto my canvas hat maker's mannequin head. And then there you see I'm now working out that point. Now there is right there, you notice this bit of lip? That's not actually a point I can heat form out. That's because I didn't glue this 100% even. That's okay, because I will be using a Dremel and some sandpaper to even this all out. I'm not a 3D printer, I'm a human, but I correct any mistakes or other issues. So once I got this back part rounded, I started working on the ears by heating the outside and then heating the inside and then pressing up from the inside with my fingers while curving it on the outside to begin to put shape into it so it's not so flat and boring and dull. And the eyes, I just heated on the outside and curved them in some more. I pushed in some cheekbone features here and slightly rounded this raised piece here and this raised piece here on the chin. I rounded rather decent amount, and then heated the center pieces here and pushed them in so they're nice and concaved, and that helps give it more depth and definition overall. Yeah. Also worked on the nostril shape a bit as well, and just evened all this stuff out on the brow too. And of course I have heated and smoothed the back, but this area right here, you can see I still got some work to do. You can see the point here. I haven't gotten that heated enough to smooth it out, and you can see these points on either side of the V-cuts right there. So those are some things I still have to work out. Well, once I get that worked out, I'm going to apply contact cement to the earpieces and glue them on. I'm not putting contact cement on the bottom, just on the edges to be joined of the actual ears. Okay, I have the heat forming done, and I put some more curvature and pulled this out to get more of that bale cowl shape on the bottom, since it kind of seems to like curve up this way to the top and kind of flare out a little bit on the bottom side here. And I followed the curve that I had put in around and then up into the ear, so it curves this way and then transitions and curves here. And I added some more curvature to the side piece here. In order to get the nose angle right, I did have to put a bit of hot glue in here and hold it in place until the hot glue cooled, and that held the shape of the nose pretty nice. And to glue the ears on, I applied contact cement to both edges, started at the bottom, and flushed it up to the top here, and then put this piece on the bottom here, and matched it up on both sides. And then I used super glue and positioned these in place where I wanted them, and glued the bottom pieces in with the super glue. And then once that was done, I took some scissors and I snipped off the excess on the 1, 2, and 3 pieces. That was kind of just coming straight up, and I wanted it to follow this angle up this way. So I did that to both sides to get it about as even as I could, you know, just by eyeballing it and looking at it. And now I'm going to go ahead and move on and start to use my Dremel and sand this. All the Dremel work is done, and I did sand every single seam also to try to help, make sure all the angles and stuff that I wanted the way I wanted them were correct. And I feel like it came out pretty good. The one thing of note here is that you'll notice on this area here where I had glued it offset to be raised up like a step, I have rounded off because on the actual cowl it's rounded off, and that was kind of always my intention. Having that plated look doesn't really fit this particular style of Batman cowl, and I did this on both sides, which gives it much more of that look. Which is, overall, every part of this was honestly hard to do, from the shape of the face to whatever. Mostly just because this, is of course a Christopher Nolan film, and Warner Brothers just kind of gives Christopher Nolan whatever amount of money he wants, and they trust him implicitly, and I don't blame them. I don't think he's had a real bad film or a flop yet, but he has such great choices on top of that, as far as who he has designed things from props and what he approves and what he wants in his vision, that for me to try to replicate that at home with stuff from a local craft store is pretty tough, but I'm struggling through it. Okay, next I'm going to hand sand it and get out some of the streaks from the Dremel, and then we'll move on to sealing and painting and finishing this up. Now that my sanding is done, you'll notice this pinkish red stuff everywhere. That is DAP acrylic latex with silicone. It actually doesn't come pink. I just put some food coloring in it for my carnage, and I have some left over. And I use this stuff to fill in any little gaps where I didn't get it glued together very well, such as right there. You see that space? Not quite big enough to put my fingernail in, but it's still noticeably there. So what I do is I take my silicone, which comes in a caulking tube, and I squeeze it out into a container. Like I said, I did mix some red food coloring. Now the reason for this is, you'll notice it's pink. Whenever it dries, it becomes clear, and that's where it turns this dark red color that almost looks black on camera here. You'll notice the pinker areas are still wet. This is a nice indicator because the thicker you put it, the longer it will take. For example, if you would put it as thickly as it comes out of the caulking gun, it would take about 24 hours. As it is this way, it takes about 2 to 6, depending on how thick I put it. But I just take my fingertip, get a little bit on the end of it, and then I just gently push it into the gap that I want to fill. And I just wipe off the excess. And I didn't quite get that filled enough, so maybe a little bit more. And gently spread out the excess. Now, to smooth all this out so it doesn't look all whiny and funky like it does right now, because I'm just using my bare finger, is I have a container filled with regular old tap water. I use that to get my finger wet and make sure I get off the excess silicone. And with my wet fingertip, I can then smooth all this out so that whenever it dries, you can't really see all the texture from my fingerprint. A little more water on my finger, and there. Nice and smooth, even. And that fills up the gap quite nicely. And I'll do a little bit more smoothing, like you notice little lines here and here. But for the sake of on camera, we're going to call this done. And once this dries, I'm going to take some Plaqsti dip and seal it. However, you'll notice I took some blue painter's masking tape and I put it on the bottom of the jaw here. That's because that's where I'm going to put my Velcro. And whenever I Plaqsti dip this, I don't want the Plaqsti dip getting on that area because I need a nice clean surface to adhere the Velcro to. So what happened? We just left off in the last clip and I was Plaqsti dipping this. Well, I'll tell you what happened. The Plaqsti turned out great, except one spot on the nose where it decided to bubble. I'm not really sure why this is. I do know if it's too cold, it will not apply correctly anywhere whatsoever, in the slightest. But due to that, I had to take that cowl and try to repair it, which failed, and then I threw it in the trash. And then I made a second cowl, which I ended up gluing the seam incorrectly, and then I tore that into shreds and threw that in the trash. So this is actually the third cowl off the same pattern that I've sanded a little bit more deeply, pretty much to the point you don't even see any registration marks. And the other thing is, you'll notice the gloss on it. I used Mod Podge this time to seal it. And I've had stuff like this happen with Plaqsti before, but a lot of times it was, lucky for me, it was in an area like the rear on the bottom or some weird spot on the inside of the ear or something or whatever, where you don't really notice it. But this was, it's the Christian Bale Batman. It's the Dark Knight Rises Batman mask. It's not perfect. It's not, screen accurate or anything, obviously, but I still want it to look awesome because I am going to wear this at some point with a cosplay. Whether it's my existing Batman, which I no longer have a mask for because I've either given them away through the Instagram giveaway a while back, or I've sold them, or I've given them to friends as presents. So this is my only Batman cowl, so I had to literally remake the whole thing, and a lot of things I can fix, and I try to show you guys on camera when I can fix stuff, but I make mistakes, and I had to do this again. So I'm going to go ahead and airbrush this black, and then I'm going to show you how I add in the Velcro, and then I'll be able to try it on and show you how it looks on me and how it fits. Okay, the paint came out with a nice matte black finish. Pretty excited for that. There is a few areas like right there I need to fill in before I do my final coat. But so far I am pretty happy and excited that this came out as good as it did, since I had to make, 3 of them. Okay, so I have added the Velcro to this, and it was pretty simple. I just glued some to one side and then glued some to the other. However, this is a piece that I cut off of, I want to say, an airsoft holster, so it actually happened to have some nylon on the back of it, but I would always put the sticky, scratchy side facing down, and the soft, grippy side, like right here, facing up. Because if when you put it on, it doesn't quite match, and you have this scratchy side, it's going to cut into your jaw and your chin, and it might be just annoying wearing it for a few minutes or an hour, but if you try to wear it all day at a convention or whatever, it's just not going to be comfortable. So if you have a sharp eye, you might have noticed that a few things are a little bit different on this cowl versus the other one. For one thing, I didn't fill in these lines as much and left it more of a cut armored look than, say, the other one, which I filled in totally. Same thing with the eyes. I left a lot of the lines in here. I kind of wanted this plated look, which isn't true, of course, to the Christian Bale, and is different from the first and second cowls that I made for this video that I rage quit on. But I wanted it more to match up with this chest armor that I made in a previous video quite a while ago, and that it wouldn't look out of place. At some point in the future, I may do a Christian Bale Dark Knight Rises type of armor, but I like my own hybrid design personally, and this thing has been through multiple wearings and has minimal damage, so it's held up really good. And it has these clips here, which is what the cape hooks into. So the cape comes up from here over the shoulders when the wind hits it, or if I just walk, it flows really, really great. And this is a 2-piece part, so that the bottom piece, when I put it on, has these shoulder straps, kind of like suspenders, to hold it in place, and then the top part goes over that. And the reason for that is if I need to twist or turn or sit down or lean back or stretch or do anything, I can do that in this. Whereas with most EVA foam armors, where all this is one piece, if you sit down, you crease and wrinkle and mess up all this. I know it has nothing to do with the video, and I'm kind of going way off subject, but that is why I did do this the way I did. So let me go ahead and try it on and show you what it looks like. Okay, and then just for the sake of the tactics, here is with a neck piece that I already had, that I didn't make for the video, I already had this. And for the chest piece, which I just showed you, of course, if I do this, I'm gonna have to paint around my eyes black. I did end up making these holes larger just so I would have some peripheral vision as I'm wearing it, and might actually need to take the eyes in a little bit just because it is cutting off my vision a little bit right here and you can't quite see my eyes. That's also the reason why you'll notice in a lot of my other Batman cowl videos, aside from like the Rockabilly Batman or the Gotham by Gaslight, I generally end up making actual eyes and just putting screen in it. Okay, so 30 seconds of Dremel work, and I took the eyes in with a little bit of Mod Podge and black paint. I sealed it right back up. So now I have unobstructed vision and you can actually see my eyes. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this video, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I suppose the moral of this video is don't give up, or if at first you don't succeed, try again and again. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video and you're stoked on how this came out and the pattern. And as always, I want to thank you all for watching, and I want to give a quick end of the video shout out to Christine Goddess, who has been sending me some really awesome photos of what she has done and is doing with her Predator cosplay. She took my feet patterns and went a much more traditional route of using couch foam and latex, which will most likely last much longer than the foam itself. It just costs a little more. And it looks amazing, and I have a feeling that her Predator cosplay, when it's done, is going to top mine and be even better. So, as always, thank you for watching. I hope you all have a great holiday, and I hope you enjoyed this last video of the year. And if you did enjoy this video and you're not a subscriber, please feel free to leave a like on this video and subscribe, as it does help out the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.